Yo, what's good YouTube? It's boardzy, and this is going to be a quick review of the Pulsar Xlite V2 wireless. And the reason it's going to be quick is because this is very similar to the original Pulsar Xlite wireless, but a few changes that, in my opinion, just make it a more solid, well-refined product. In terms of the shape and the actual specs, they are identical to the prior version. But one thing that changed is the sides. These no longer have the honeycomb, not even a honeycomb, just these lines, these big ass line holes. Like, not a fan of them. So I'm really happy that they have the solid shell design now. And obviously a change like that is not going to massively impact how you perform, but I found it a lot easier to just get a solid, consistent grip on the V2 wireless as opposed to the V1, because on these little cheese grater holes, they were just always very slippery and hard to grip, and it gave the mouse much less of a premium feel, and I feel like the V2 is just coming together a bit more. They also, one of my biggest complaints on the original was that there was just nothing happening at the bottom of the mouse. How are you going to have weight balancing when like half of the mouse just has nothing aside from light ass shell towards the bottom of it? So it seems like Pulsar listened, they put the battery at the bottom, and now the weight balancing, it's looking better. It's looking better. In game, feels perfectly fine. There's not really anything to note about the weight. It's still 59 grams, which is incredibly light for a somewhat larger ergo shape. I'll show the size versus the super light, so you can see it's like, I would say it's a medium large mouse. It's not like a super large sized mouse. But yeah, getting back to the weight balancing, as you can see, they put the battery and just a bit of plastic towards the bottom to help with that weight balancing. And in my opinion, just makes the mouse feel nicer and also makes it glide better. Because one thing I noticed was that the stock PTFE skates on the V2 version were just feeling a lot better than the stock skates on the V1 version. I'm sure it won't like really show up in the glide test, but it just feels like a much more consistent glide. And I think that would come down to the weight balancing unless they actually updated the material used for the PTFE skates. And getting rid of the side holes along with the weight balancing improvements are really the bulk of the changes to this mouse. Everything else I think revolves around the scroll wheel. They apparently increased the height of it by 1 millimeter compared to the standard version, which you can notice the standard one had a very low profile feeling wheel. Never interfered with my use of it personally, but I mean, if it's higher and that was a problem for some people, once again, it's nice to see Pulsar addressing the problems people had with their mouse and pumping out a better version of it. But yeah, the specs, the shape, they're still identical to the old version, so I don't really need to cover them in depth. 3370 sensor, Kill 8.0 main switches. Something I had hoped to see was actually an update to these side button switches. As you can see, they're not using an actual micro switch. It's just this dot switch. It's the same switch that the Fanatic Bolt uses, and in my opinion, it just produces a pretty weak and dull feeling side button click. Just not the best in my opinion. Still usable in a side button intensive game like Fortnite, and if you just use your side buttons for like a pretty casual bind, it won't matter at all. I don't want to rant about it for too long, but I don't know what it comes down to, whether it's saving weight or saving money, but something causes companies to use these very dull and hollow feeling side button switches that are not as light and easily spammable as better side button options. But at the end of the day, it is not the end of the world, and I was still able to use these for build binds in Fortnite. But yeah, I think that kind of just covers everything that changed about this mouse. I didn't really talk about the build quality because I have only had this mouse for around a week, so I cannot speak on the long-term use. But at least in terms of side creaking and flexing, there's nothing to report. While on the original Xlite wireless, I definitely did have some flexing. I don't know if that was due to the honeycomb shells, but it's not there on the updated version, and no creaking really on either. There is still that feature where you can press one of the side buttons by pressing on this leg down here. Doesn't really matter because you will never press like that in game, but it's a cool feature. It's a cool feature. You pick up the mouse mid-fight, boom, side button. But yeah, for $80, this is a very solid wireless ergo shape. If you want something that's light, pretty affordable and well performing, and you don't mind this relatively just generic ergo shape, then I would say go for it, because the Xlite V2 wireless, it's solid improvement over the original one. If you have the original one, I would not say the changes are significant enough to really warrant buying the mouse again. But yeah, the V2 certainly better than the V1. Pulsar is getting sort of endgamey with milking this shape for a very long time, but I know they have their ambi mice, which are supposed to be under 50 grams, 33.95, supposedly coming out this summer. So I will excuse them on that. But yeah, they need to make some ambi shapes, because I don't know, even though this mouse is getting there spec wise, they're making the improvements, it's still not something that I would say is in my personal like top 3 or top 5 mice. But yeah, that's really all I gotta say for this video. Solid job to Pulsar, and I will make a video on the Super Glides and whether or not they've worn down pretty soon. So stay tuned for that. Like and sub if you have enjoyed the video, and yeah, peace.